I'm leaving you and the kids.
What? You can't be serious.
I am. I'm with a rich woman now.
No, please.
There are moments in a person's life that never fully leave the body. Not the big ceremonial ones. The small, quiet ones that arrive without warning on an ordinary evening and split everything into before and after. Denise Cole has one of those moments. She can describe it with the precision of someone reading from a document she has memorized. The exact temperature of the air in that kitchen. The weight of the baby in her arms. The sound the bottle made when she set it on the counter. The way the engine started in the driveway, and the way the sound of it faded, and the way the silence that came after it was heavier than any silence she had ever sat inside. She has replayed that moment more times than she can count across 25 years. And every single time it ends the same way, with 3 baby monitors blinking green in the dark, and with a decision she made sitting alone in that kitchen, a decision that would take 2.5 decades to fully arrive at its answer. What I am about to tell you is the story of that answer. It is the story of what a woman builds when a man tells her she is nothing and drives away. It is the story of 3 daughters who grew up without a father and became extraordinary because of their mother and despite his absence. And it is the story of a man who spent 25 years constructing a life out of borrowed money and borrowed time, and who came back to Greenville, South Carolina one April afternoon with nothing left, parked across the street from a house he had never set foot in, sat in his car for a very long time, and then walked up the driveway and knocked on a door that belonged to a life he had chosen to have nothing to do with. What was waiting for him on the other side of that door is something the people in that neighborhood have never forgotten. I am going to tell you every detail, every single one, but you have to stay with me from the beginning, because if you skip ahead, you will miss everything that makes the ending mean what it means. Stay with me. This story earns every minute you give it. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Raymond Cole was 31 years old and managing a logistics warehouse on the east side of Greenville when the thing that had been quietly eating at him his entire adult life finally found something to feed on. He was not a bad man, not in the obvious ways. He showed up to work. He paid his bills. He did not raise his voice or make scenes. But underneath all of that reliability was a hunger he had never learned to manage, a hunger that measured everything by comparison and found everything wanting. He had watched his father work 2 jobs for 30 years and arrive at the end of it with nothing to show, and Raymond had decided early that he was going to be different. The problem was that different, for Raymond, meant visible. It meant the right car, the right address, the right kind of life that people could see and assess and conclude that he had made it. He had not made it. He was in a warehouse on the east side of Greenville managing other people's inventory, and the gap between where he was and where he believed he deserved to be was something he woke up with every morning and carried through every day. Denise was the reason that gap had not consumed him sooner. She was a labor and delivery nurse, steady and generous and fully present in the way of someone for whom showing up completely is simply the natural way of being in the world. She loved Raymond without conditions and without performance and without ever asking him to be more than he was, which was precisely the kind of love that a man with Raymond's particular hunger either grows into or eventually walks away from. She was also the reason the warehouse and the east side and the life that felt too small had not broken him yet. Because when Raymond got restless, Denise steadied him. When he started measuring himself against men who had more, she redirected his attention to what they had built together. For 4 years, she was enough ballast to keep him from drifting. Then the triplets happened, and the ballast stopped being enough. The ultrasound was on a Wednesday in February. The technician moved the wand slowly across Denise's stomach and then went very quiet. Then she said, "I need both of you to look at this screen. There are 3 heartbeats." Denise cried immediately, instant tears she could not have stopped if she tried. She reached for Raymond's hand and held it so hard her knuckles went white. Raymond looked at the screen and did not speak for a long time. 3 heartbeats. 3 of everything. 18 years of everything, multiplied by 3. He said one word. 3. He said it the way you say a number when the math is not working, and you cannot make it work no matter how many times you run it. Denise heard the shock in it and held his hand tighter, thinking she understood what he was feeling. She was wrong. Not about the shock. About what was underneath it. Because Raymond was not standing in that room feeling the weight of a miracle. He was calculating. He He was measuring the gap between what a man on a warehouse salary could provide and what 3 children would require, and the gap was not closable by any honest means available to him. And somewhere in the car on the drive home from that appointment, a thought arrived that he should have recognized for what it was and dismissed immediately. He did not dismiss it. He let it sit. He told himself he was just thinking through options. He told himself that looking at a thing was not the same as doing a thing. And while he was telling himself that, the thought settled in and made itself comfortable and began to look, from certain angles, almost like a plan. Her name was Candace Whitfield, and she owned the building that Raymond managed. She came twice a year for walkthroughs, the kind of visit that reminds a tenant who the building actually belongs to. The first time she came, it was unremarkable. She was professional. She looked at what she needed to look at. She left. The second time, she stayed longer than the walkthrough required. She asked Raymond questions that had nothing to do with the lease. She looked at him with the particular attention of someone who has decided they are interested in something and wants to understand it better. Before she left, she said, "You are wasting yourself in a place like this. You have the kind of presence that belongs somewhere bigger." She said it lightly, as if it were simply an observation rather than something aimed with precision. Raymond drove home and replayed it 3 times before he pulled into his own driveway. She called his work number 2 weeks later. Said she had a question about the building. They talked for 45 minutes, and the building came up once. Raymond told himself it was networking. He told himself that a man in his position would be foolish not to cultivate a connection like this. He told himself a lot of things over the weeks that followed, because telling yourself things is how you do what you know you should not do while maintaining the internal fiction that you have not really decided anything yet. By the time Denise was 3 months pregnant, Raymond was having regular lunches with Candace in parts of the city where he was unlikely to run into anyone he knew. By the time Denise was 5 months pregnant, those lunches had become something else entirely. And by the time Denise was 7 months pregnant, enormous and exhausted, and working double nursing shifts to build up savings before the girls arrived, Raymond was spending Thursday evenings in Candace's apartment telling her things about his life, his frustrations, his sense of being built for something larger, that he had never said out loud to anyone. And here's the thing about that. Raymond was not telling Candace those things because she understood him better than Denise did. He was telling her because she never pushed back on any of it. Denise loved him enough to tell him the truth when he needed to hear it, to redirect him when his thinking got distorted by comparison and envy. Candace had no interest in any of that. She was interested in his company. She was interested in the way he looked at her world as if it were everything he had ever wanted, because that look made her feel like the source of something valuable. She was a woman who had inherited a life rather than built one, and Raymond's hunger mistook her confidence for substance. He thought she saw something exceptional in him. What she actually saw was a man who was grateful to be in her orbit. And grateful men, in Candace's experience, were easy to keep around. The worst part of all of it, the part that is hardest to sit with, is what Denise was doing during those Thursday evenings. She was at home. She was managing 3 babies who had not yet arrived, but were already reorganizing her entire body around their needs. She was washing tiny onesies and assembling the 3rd crib and making lists of what they would need in the first weeks. She was trusting without question that the man she had been married to for 4 years was where he said he was. She had no reason not to trust him. He had never given her a reason not to trust him. So she trusted him, completely, the way you trust someone when you have no evidence that they are unworthy of it. And Raymond, knowing she trusted him, kept driving to the other side of the city on Thursday evenings and telling himself he had not decided anything yet. He had decided. He had been deciding for months. He was just not ready to call it what it was. So he kept using the word options. He kept telling himself he was simply a man who had not yet fully committed to a particular direction. He kept performing the role of present husband and expectant father while privately rehearsing the exit he had not yet admitted to himself he was already planning. This is the part of the story that is almost impossible to explain to people who have never understood how someone can do this. How a person can look their pregnant wife in the eyes and ask how she is feeling and then drive to another woman's apartment an hour later. The answer is that they stop looking. Not at the wife. At themselves. Raymond had stopped looking at himself honestly so long ago that the man performing the husband role and the man planning the exit had become 2 separate people in his mind. And the separation made it possible to keep doing what he was doing without fully feeling the weight of it. until the babies arrived. And then it became very, very hard to keep the two people separated. Because 3 newborns make everything real. They make the future real and the past real, and the present so immediately and physically demanding that there is no room left for the comfortable fictions a person has been living inside. Raymond held each of his daughters in the hospital, briefly, once each. He looked at their faces and felt something he immediately tried to categorize as fear of responsibility rather than allowing it to be what it actually was, which was love arriving whether he wanted it to or not. He got out of the hospital and called Candace from the parking lot. He told her the babies had come. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "So what are you going to do?" And Raymond, standing in a hospital parking lot with 3 daughters he had just held for the first time, said, "I am working on it." That was the moment the decision stopped being a possibility and became a plan. He just needed a few more weeks to execute it. Madison, Morgan, and Mia came home on a Saturday in October, 9 days after they were born, small and fragile and more alive than anything Denise had ever been responsible for. She had spent those 9 days at the NICU for every visiting hour, sitting beside the incubators talking to her daughters through the glass, learning the particular sound of each one's breathing, the specific way each face moved in sleep. She had memorized them before she could even hold them, which is something only a mother who is already completely in it can do. By the time they came home, she knew each daughter the way you know something you have studied with your whole heart. She knew which one would settle fastest, and which one would fight sleep, and which one needed to be held slightly differently to stop fussing. She knew all of it. She had been paying attention. Raymond had visited the NICU 4 times in 9 days. Denise noticed. She noted it with the same quiet, non-confrontational precision with which she had been noting his absence for months. She did not bring it up. She told herself the NICU was hard for anyone to be in. That men process things differently. That he would come around when the girls were home, and the reality of them became tangible in a different way. She was still making excuses for him, still finding the most charitable interpretation available, because she was 9 days postpartum with triplets, and the alternative to charity was a conversation she did not yet have the capacity to have. The first night home was a kind of survival that dismantles a person's understanding of what tired actually means. 3 newborns do not coordinate their needs. They wake separately, cry separately, require separate attention at separate intervals throughout the night in a rotation that does not pause or ease or give a person a window long enough to feel rested. Denise managed it with a color-coded system on a notepad taped to the nursery wall, feeding times and diaper changes tracked in red pen by daughter and by hour. She moved through the dark house like someone running a night shift, because that was exactly what she was doing. Raymond slept in the bedroom. She did not wake him. On the 3rd night, when she had not had more than 90 consecutive minutes of sleep since the girls came home, she stood in the nursery doorway at 4 in the morning holding 2 babies with a 3rd crying in the crib behind her, and she thought, "He has not offered once. Not once." She filed that thought somewhere in the back of her mind and kept moving. She did not have time to stop and examine what it meant. She had 3 babies who needed her. So she kept moving. The weeks that followed had a particular texture that Denise would describe years later as like swimming in concrete. Everything required enormous effort. Everything was hard in ways that compounded on themselves. The joy was absolutely real. She would be clear about that. The love she felt for those 3 girls was the most powerful thing she had ever experienced. But the joy and the love existed alongside a physical exhaustion so profound it altered her perception of time, alongside a financial pressure that never fully released, alongside the growing and undeniable awareness that the man she had married was not in this with her. He was present in the house the way furniture is present, taking up space, not contributing to the life being lived around it. It was a Sunday evening in late November. The girls were 6 weeks old. Denise was in the kitchen running the evening feeding rotation, 2 babies in the bouncer on the counter, 1 in her arms, moving between them with the efficient exhaustion of someone who has been doing this long enough that the movements have become automatic. Raymond came in through the back door. He always came through the front. She looked up at the sound of the wrong door opening, and something in her registered it before her brain caught up. He was not wearing his jacket. He set his keys on the counter too carefully, the deliberate carefulness of someone concentrating on appearing normal. Denise looked at his face. Then she looked past him. There was a bag on the floor by the back door. The large duffel from the top shelf of the closet. fully packed. Everything she had been not understanding for months arrived in that single second. She set the baby in the bouncer. She turned to face him. "Raymond," she said. Her voice was steady. She had the voice of a woman who deals in other people's emergencies and has learned to hold steady inside her own. "Please. We have 3 daughters who are 6 weeks old. Whatever is happening between us, we can work through it. Tell me what you need. Tell me what is wrong. I am right here." He looked at her, and she saw something in his expression that she had not seen before. The look of a person who has been in the process of leaving for so long that the actual leaving has already happened in their mind, and what they are doing now is simply catching the physical world up to where they have already been. He told her there was someone else. He said the name without hesitating. Candace. He said he had been with her for months. He said he was done. He picked up the bag and walked toward the front of the house. Denise followed him. She was not too proud to beg. She had never subscribed to the idea that a person should protect their dignity over their family. She followed him and she grabbed his arm in the doorway, and she said, "Look at me. Look at what we have. Those girls need you. I need you. Whatever she has given you that I have not, I will find a way. Please do not walk out that door." He looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face. And what she saw in his expression in that moment, she would say years later, was the thing that finally broke something open in her. Not cruelty, not anger, indifference. He looked at her with the complete and settled indifference of a man who has already moved on and is mildly inconvenienced by the attachment of the person he is leaving behind. He said, "Look at yourself, Denise. You have nothing. You are nothing. You think I am going to spend the rest of my life broke and stuck with you, and these kids going nowhere? I deserve better than this. I deserve better than you." He said it at full volume. The window beside the door was open. They had left it open because it had been a warm day for November, one of those last warm days before winter settles in completely. The street outside was not empty. There was a woman across the way on her porch and a man 2 houses down walking his dog, and at least one other neighbor whose porch light had come on while they were talking. Raymond knew the window was open. He looked directly at Denise when he said it. He said it anyway. Then he moved her hand off his arm, walked to his car, put the bag in the trunk with the practiced efficiency of someone who packed it knowing exactly how this evening was going to go, got in, started the engine, and drove away without once checking the mirror. She stood on the front step until she could no longer hear his car. Then she went back inside to her daughters. She sat at the kitchen table that night after all 3 babies were finally asleep at the same time, which they almost never were, and she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She did not call her mother. She did not call a friend. She sat alone at the table and she let his words land completely, because she understood that half-landing something terrible only meant you carried it longer. Nothing. You are nothing. She sat with those words, and she turned them over, and she examined them from every angle. And what she found, sitting there at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning with 3 sleeping daughters down the hall, was that the words were not true. She knew they were not true. She had always known who she was. Raymond's opinion of her had never been the source of that knowledge. But what the words were, she realized, was fuel. He had handed her the most powerful possible motivation she could have been given, and he had not even understood he was doing it. She was going to make something of that. She did not know yet exactly what. She just knew that she was not going to sit at this table and let his voice be the last word on what she and her daughters were capable of. She went to bed. She was at the hospital by 6 the next morning. Her mother Gloria arrived the next morning with 2 suitcases and a slow cooker and did not knock, just walked in with her own key and went directly to whichever baby was crying. She had driven 3.5 hours from Augusta, and she did not ask a single question about what had happened or how Denise was feeling or what the plan was. She simply arrived and began. That was Gloria. She had raised Denise largely on her own after Denise's father left when Denise was 7. And she had done it without complaint and without bitterness, and with a consistency of presence that had shaped Denise so completely that Denise did not even fully recognize it as a gift until she was standing in her own kitchen, watching her mother pick up her granddaughter and understanding. This is where I learned how to do this. This is exactly where. Gloria stayed for 11 months. In that time, she and Denise developed the rhythms of 2 women running a household together with complete mutual trust, and without wasting a single word on things that did not need to be said. They divided the nights without discussing it. They covered each other's exhaustion without announcing it. When Denise went back to work at 11 weeks postpartum, Gloria held down the house with the calm efficiency of a woman for whom showing up was never a question. And Denise went back to work because she had to, not because she was ready, because Raymond's court-ordered child support covered approximately 1/3 of what 3 infants required. 1/3. The rest was Denise. Every dollar of it. The financial reality of those first years was something Denise has never dramatized in the telling, which makes it more rather than less striking. There were months when she paid one bill and deferred another, and then worked the following month to catch up before something else needed to be deferred again. There were weeks when the grocery budget required real decisions, not preferences, but actual choices between things they needed. There were 2 occasions in the girl's first 3 years when the power was cut off because she had stretched the payment too far, and the utility company ran out of patience before the paycheck arrived. The first time it happened, the girls were 14 months old. She lit candles and told them it was camping. They were too young to understand, but they responded to her voice, which was calm, because she needed it to be calm, because 3 14-month-olds take their emotional temperature directly from the adult in the room, and Denise was not going to let them feel her fear. She paid the bill the next morning before she went into her shift. She never let it happen a third time. She hired a family law attorney 3 weeks after Raymond left, and she was as organized and methodical about that process as she was about everything else. She had the documentation in order. She knew what she was entitled to. She did not approach it from anger, though the anger was real. She approached it as a logistical problem to be solved efficiently so she could redirect her energy to everything else that needed her attention. The child support order was in place within 6 weeks. Raymond complied with it. Denise never expected more from him than the legal minimum, which was the clearest possible measure of how thoroughly she had recalibrated her expectations of him in those first weeks. In the evenings after the girls went to sleep, when Gloria took over the monitor duty and told Denise to go sit down somewhere, Denise sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and studied. She had found a healthcare administration certification program that could be completed online in her own time. She worked through it in the windows the girls' nap schedules provided. 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there, progress so slow it barely felt like progress until the day she looked at how far she had come and understood that slow progress sustained over time becomes something else entirely. She finished the certification in 14 months, which was 2 months faster than the program estimated for full-time students. She was not a full-time student. She was a mother of triplets working 12-hour nursing shifts. She finished it anyway. She applied for every supervisory posting at the hospital. She was turned down twice. The third time she applied, she got the role. Charge nurse. A step up in responsibility and a meaningful step up in pay. She called Gloria from the hospital parking lot when she found out. Gloria said, "Of course you did." Denise said, "I want to do more." Gloria said, "I know. Keep going." So she kept going. 2 years after that, she was in a director track conversation with hospital leadership. For years after Raymond left, she was director of nursing operations for her entire floor. The salary increase was significant. The first thing she did with it was open a savings account in each daughter's name and set up automatic transfers. The amounts were small at first. She did not care about the amounts. She cared about the habit. She cared about the fact that every month, without fail, something was going in. Because she had learned something about herself in those years that she had not known before Raymond left. That she was built for the long game. That she could sustain effort and intention over time in a way that other people found difficult. Raymond had needed immediate returns on everything. He had left because the returns on a family were too slow and too uncertain. Denise was built differently. She planted things, and she tended them, and she waited without anxiety for them to grow. And they grew. She never said a negative word about Raymond to his daughters. Not one. In 25 years. People would ask how she managed it, and she would say, "Those girls carry half of him in their bodies. If I poison him, I poison them. And I will not do that." It was the most generous thing she did for a man who deserved very little of her generosity. But she did not do it for him. She did it for her daughters, and for herself, because she was not going to carry his weight in her mouth for the rest of her life. She set it down. She kept walking. And she let his daughters form their own understanding of him, in their own time, from their own experience of what it meant that he was not there. What they eventually concluded about their father, they concluded without a single word of influence from her. And it was more damning than anything she could have manufactured. Madison was the firstborn by 11 minutes, and she understood the weight of those 11 minutes from a very young age. Not because anyone told her, because she felt it. She was the one who checked on her sisters at night when she heard them stir, who learned her teachers' names on the first day and her classmates' allergies by the second week, who kept a mental inventory of who in the household was running low on something before anyone else noticed. She decided in 4th grade that she was going to be a doctor, not because anyone suggested it, because she had watched her mother perform medicine for years and understood that it was the highest form of what she valued most, which was showing up for people with real knowledge and real skill at the moment they needed it most. From the day she made that decision, she treated every subject in school as preparation. She did not do it for the grades, though the grades came. She did it because she had decided, and a decision for Madison meant something. It had weight. It did not evaporate when things got hard. She had a moment in 7th grade that her English teacher talked about for the rest of her career. The class had been assigned a paper about someone who had influenced them. Most students chose athletes or musicians or a famous historical figure. Madison wrote about her mother. 3 pages, single-spaced, submitted a day early. She wrote about a woman who had been told she was nothing and had decided that the most complete possible answer to that word was to build everything. She wrote about watching her mother study at the kitchen table after 12-hour shifts. About the color-coded savings accounts that started with $20 a month when $20 was a sacrifice. About the way Denise moved through every difficult thing with a steadiness that Madison had come to understand was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move through fear without letting it slow you down. The teacher gave her the highest grade in the class, and then kept a copy of the essay in her desk drawer until she retired. She said later that in 30 years of teaching, she had never read anything written by a 12-year-old that she thought about as often as she thought about that paper. At 16, Madison was accepted into a selective summer pre-medicine program at a university in Chapel Hill. The program cost money Denise did not comfortably have. Denise paid it without hesitation and without telling Madison what it cost her. Madison found out years later when she was going through old bank statements Denise had kept in a shoebox. She called her mother. She said, "You paid for Chapel Hill the same month the car needed new brakes, and you had a gap in your insurance coverage." Denise said yes. Madison said, "Why did you not tell me?" Denise said, "Because it was not your problem to carry. It was mine." Madison had to put the phone down for a moment. She came back and said, "I am going to spend my whole career trying to be what you are." Denise said, "You already are. You have been since you were 11. Morgan was the middle triplet by 6 minutes, and she had a gift that no class or credential could produce. She could read a room. She could walk into any space and within moments know the exact emotional temperature of every person in it. Who was struggling? Who was pretending? Who needed someone to just sit down next to them without making a thing of it? She knew when her mother was tired long before Denise acknowledged it. On those evenings, she would start the dishes without being asked or get her sisters moving toward baths. Small acts of care performed so quietly that they almost went unnoticed. Almost. Morgan was 12 when a boy at school asked her why she did not have a father at her track meets. She told him some families were built differently, and hers was built by her mother, and that was enough. She came home and repeated the exchange to Denise word for word. Denise asked her, "Did you believe it when you said it?" Morgan thought about it for a real moment. Then she said, "I think I am going to be angry about it for a while before I fully believe it." Denise said, "That is honest. Take all the time you need with the angry part." Morgan took 3 weeks. She ran harder in practice during those 3 weeks than she had ever run. Her coach asked what had changed. She said, "I found something to run toward." She did not explain what. She redirected the anger into velocity and kept going. That was Morgan. Nothing stayed still in her. Everything got converted into forward motion. At 15, Morgan started a peer support group at her high school for students dealing with absent parents. She did not make a speech about it or put her personal history on display. She just put up a flyer and held the first meeting, and 9 people came. By the end of the year, the group had 22 members, and her school counselor had recommended it for a district-wide program. When the counselor asked Morgan where the idea had come from, Morgan said, "I noticed there were a lot of us, and nobody had made a place for us to talk to each other." The counselor put her recommendation in writing. The program went district-wide the following year. Morgan was 16. She had no idea yet that she had just done, on a small scale, the thing she would spend her professional life doing on a much larger one. At 17, Mia submitted a portfolio to a regional juried art competition. She did not tell anyone she had submitted it. She did not want to manage anyone else's anticipation on top of her own. She found out she had won third place on a Tuesday afternoon, and she went home and made dinner before she mentioned it. She set the certificate on the table next to the bread basket. Gloria saw it first. She picked it up and looked at it, and looked at Mia, and said, "Child, why is this next to the bread?" Mia said, "Because we have to eat dinner." Gloria stood up and hugged her for a long time, without saying anything else. When Denise came home from her shift and saw the certificate, and then looked at Mia, Mia said, "I was going to tell you." Denise said, "I know." She sat down at the table and just looked at her daughter for a moment. Mia said, "Stop looking at me like that." Denise said, "I am trying to memorize it." Then they had dinner, and nobody made a large thing of it, and it was one of the best evenings any of them could remember in years. All three girls grew up in a house where the table was always set, where homework was always checked even on the nights Denise came home barely able to stand, where birthdays had real cakes and hard times did not get hidden but did not get amplified either. They were raised by a woman who treated difficulty as information rather than catastrophe, who met every hard thing with the same question: what needs to happen next, and who can do it? They grew up watching her do this every single day. They absorbed it the way children absorb everything that is modeled for them consistently over years. They became women who met difficulty the same way. And when Raymond Cole came back 25 years later and stood in their mother's living room, what he stood in front of was the full, living, breathing result of every choice Denise had made in every hard moment across those 25 years. He was about to find that out in a way he would never forget. Madison graduated valedictorian. In her speech, she said, "I was raised by a woman who was told she was nothing and who built everything. That is where I come from, and that is where I am going." Denise sat in the fourth row and let the tears fall without touching them because she refused to take her eyes off her daughter for a single second. Morgan graduated with a full scholarship to Atlanta. Mia received her regional arts scholarship at 16. On the night that letter arrived, Mia put it on the kitchen counter without a word. Denise read it, turned off the stove, pulled her daughter into a hug that lasted a long time. Mia said against her mother's shoulder, "I am going to be okay, aren't I?" Denise said, "You were always going to be okay. Because of what you already are. I just made sure nothing got in the way of it." Raymond Cole did not know about any of it. He was somewhere else entirely, performing a version of himself that was already starting to come apart at the edges. His daughters were becoming extraordinary without him. The bill for his choices was getting longer every year. He had not received it yet, but it was coming. Raymond moved into Candace's world, and he performed. He attended her events and wore the clothes she approved of and smiled at the people she needed him to smile at, and he told himself, with complete conviction for the first several years, that this was the life he had always been owed. He had a title at her property management company. He had a salary. He had an apartment in a building downtown with a view he photographed and sent to no one because there was no one in his life anymore who would have received it correctly. His friends from before had faded. The way friends fade when a man makes a choice that changes him into someone they do not recognize, and he does not reach back across the distance to maintain the connection. His family he had never been close to. He had Candace's world and the performance of belonging in it, and for a while that was enough to feel like a life. The cracks arrived slowly. They always do. Candace had a particular way of communicating disappointment that did not involve raising her voice or making scenes. She simply revised her assessment of the person who had disappointed her and began treating them according to the revised version. Raymond failed at 2 business ventures she backed. The first was a property investment partnership that dissolved when his chosen partner turned out to be unreliable with money. The second was a logistics consulting firm, the one area where Raymond had actual expertise, but the industry had changed in the years he had been away from it, and he had not kept up. He dissolved that one himself before Candace had to ask. Both times, she covered the losses without discussion. Both times the silence afterward had a temperature that removed something from how she looked at him that never fully came back. He noticed. He kept performing. He did not contact his daughters. Not once in 25 years. He told himself he would reach out when he had something to show them, when the call would arrive as something other than an admission that he had left them for a life that was not working. He told himself this so consistently and for so long that it became the story he lived inside rather than the excuse it actually was. The years kept passing. He kept not calling. And the weight of it kept growing in a part of him he did not look at directly, because looking at it directly would have required him to reckon with what he had done, and reckoning was the one thing he had always been least equipped to do. The end with Candace came on a Wednesday morning 11 years after Raymond had moved into her world. She called him into her home office, which she used as a kind of executive chamber for decisions she had already made and was now delivering, and she told him she had met someone. She said she had valued their time together. She said her attorney was already briefed on the employment situation. Then she slid an envelope across the desk. A reference letter, already written and sealed. Raymond held that envelope and understood in one complete moment everything that the previous 11 years had actually been. He had not been in a relationship. He had been in a role. The role had come with a salary and a title and a view from an apartment window and the feeling of belonging to something larger than himself. And now the role was being eliminated, and here was his paperwork. He thanked her. He walked out. He sat in the parking lot of her building for 40 minutes. Then he drove back to the apartment that was in his name, but in a building she owned, and started packing. He moved back to Greenville because it was the only place that had ever been fully real to him, even though he had burned it down. He took a room in a boarding house on the west side, clean and modest, paid weekly. He found work through a staffing agency. Logistics coordination, a step and a half below where he had started at 31, and he was grateful for it in a way he would not have been capable of at 31. He showed up. He did the work. He was quiet about his past. And in the evenings at his small table he began, slowly and with a particular kind of dread, to look up his daughters. Madison, attending physician, internal medicine, Carolina's Medical Center. He read that title and had to set the phone down. His daughter was a doctor. He had told her she was going nowhere. She was practicing medicine at one of the largest hospital systems in the state. Morgan, Director of Communications, Cornerstone Families, Atlanta. He looked up the organization. It provided resources and advocacy for single-parent households. He read the mission statement 3 times. He read Morgan's biography on the staff page. He read a magazine profile of her. The journalist had asked how she had found her calling. She had said, "I grew up knowing what it cost when people didn't show up. I decided I wanted to spend my life on the other side of that equation." Raymond put the phone down and went for a walk around the block. When he came back, he looked up Mia. Mia had a gallery exhibition in Greenville. He drove there the next afternoon and walked in and told himself he was just going to look at the work. He stood in that gallery for the better part of an hour. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a triptych, 3 panels hung as one. 3 women, clearly related, all 3 looking directly out of the canvas at the viewer. He stood in front of it for a long time trying to name what he was seeing in their faces. The word he found was earned. They had earned whatever they were wearing. He had not been there for a single moment of the earning. He read the placard. "What we built. Artist, Mia Cole." He had to sit down in one of the folding chairs near the door. He sat there until the staff began closing for the evening. He drove back to his boarding house. He sat at his small table, and he made the only decision that had felt true in a very long time. He was going to find them. He was going to stand in front of his daughters and say the truth. Not because he expected anything. Because carrying it alone for the rest of his life without ever saying it to their faces was something he finally understood he could not do. He did not call first. He understood what a phone call gave them, the ability to say no before he was in the room, and he did not have the standing to absorb that no from a distance. He found the address through public records. He drove to Millbrook Drive on a Saturday in early April, the kind of Greenville afternoon where the dogwoods are out, and the air has that particular early spring quality of something just beginning. He parked across the street and looked at the house. White with green shutters. A front porch with 2 rocking chairs. A garden along the left side of the yard already showing the first growth of the season. 3 cars in the driveway. He had not planned for 3 cars. He did not know about the Sunday dinner tradition. He had driven to the one day of the week when all 3 daughters were home. He sat across the street and thought about that for a long moment, whether it was coincidence or something that deserved a different word. Then he got out of the car. He crossed the street. He walked up the driveway. He went up the 3 porch steps. He raised his hand. He knocked. And then he stood at the door of a house he had never been inside, built by a woman he had called nothing, and he waited. The pause before the door opened felt very long. Then Denise was standing there. 25 years had passed, and she was in the doorway of her own house, and she looked at him with an expression he could not categorize. Not cold, not warm, not shocked, just the assessment. The same look she had always given things she needed to understand before she responded to them. She said his name as a question. He said hers. He said, "I know I have no right to be here." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "All three of my daughters are inside. Do you understand what you are walking into?" He said, "Yes." She held his eyes for one more second. Then she stepped back and let him through the door. The living room was full of the life of a family in the middle of a Sunday. Plates from lunch still on the coffee table. A blanket on the couch. The sound of conversation that had stopped the moment the door opened. Three women turned and looked at him. Madison near the bookshelf, arms at her sides, completely still with the stillness of someone holding something very deliberately in place. Morgan rising slowly from the couch, her face moving through something complicated before it settled into something careful and clear. And Mia at the table across the room, sketchbook open, who looked at him for exactly one long moment, and then picked up her pencil and began to draw without saying a word. She was going to make a record of this. She was not going to let this moment exist only in memory. Raymond stood in that living room and understood immediately what kind of family he had left behind. The kind that bore witness. The kind that documented. The kind that did not let important things disappear without evidence. He looked at the three of them and the room and the photographs on the walls and the life arranged in every corner of that house, and he understood, in a way that had no comfortable interpretation available, what 25 years had actually produced. Three women who were whole and accomplished and deeply rooted. A house that Denise had bought with her own money and filled with her own life. A garden growing outside the window. He had told her she was nothing. He had told these daughters they were going nowhere. He was standing inside everything that Word had built in response to him. And there was no version of being in that room that did not require him to reckon with that fully. Before we get to what happened in that room, let us know in the comments what you are thinking right now. And if you are not yet subscribed, please do it right now so you never miss what we bring you next. Nobody offered Raymond a seat. He stood in the middle of that living room while his daughters looked at him and Denise remained near the door behind him, and the silence had the quality of something that has been held under enormous pressure for a very long time and has finally been set down. Raymond cleared his throat. He said he knew he had no right to be there. He said he had not come to ask for anything. He said there was a debt he owed that could not be paid in the ordinary way, and the only honest thing he could still do with it was to say it to their faces. He was sorry. 2 words. No elaboration around them. No performance. Just the words, delivered plainly, and then silence. Madison stepped forward from near the bookshelf. Her voice was the voice she used in examination rooms when she needed to say something difficult and needed the patient to receive it clearly. She said, "I have one question. I need the true answer, not the answer that makes you look better. In 25 years, did you think about us the way a father thinks about his children?" She paused. "Not recently. In those years when we were small, when we were in school, when we had moments that fathers are supposed to be there for, did you actually think about us?" Raymond was quiet for a real moment. The kind of quiet that is not stalling but genuine processing. Then he said, "I told myself I did. But no, not the way you deserved. Not the way I should have." Madison held his gaze. She nodded once, slowly. She said, "Thank you for not lying about that. Most people would have." She stepped back. Morgan stood from the couch. She did not cross the room. She spoke from where she was, and her voice was level with the steadiness of someone who has processed the feeling underneath so completely that it no longer shakes the container it lives in. She said, "I want you to know something. I run an organization that supports single-parent families. I have been doing it for 7 years. Every resource we have built, every family we have helped, it exists because I grew up knowing exactly what the cost of an absent parent looks like from the inside. I did not start that organization because of you. I started it before I ever thought you would walk back into our lives. But I want you to understand the full weight of what you left behind and what it became. The damage you did became the foundation of something that has changed hundreds of families for the better. I am not telling you that so you feel better about what you did." She paused. "I am telling you so you understand that we did not waste what you left us with. We built with it." She sat back down. Then Mia turned the sketchbook around. She held it up, and Raymond looked at what she had drawn while he was standing there talking, which was him. His face, rendered in the fast and utterly precise lines of someone who draws what she actually sees rather than what she might prefer to see. He was older in the drawing than he felt from the inside. He looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than tired, that went all the way down to something structural. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for a very long time and had arrived somewhere to try to set it down and was not yet sure whether he would be allowed to. Mia said, "I have been drawing faces my whole life. I can always see what a person is holding." She looked at him directly. "You are holding a lot. That is not mine to take from you. But I want you to look at that drawing and understand exactly what you look like when you walk into a room of people you abandoned and ask for their attention." Raymond looked at the drawing for a long moment. He said, "That is exactly what I look like." Mia said, "Then we are starting from somewhere true." She lowered the sketchbook and opened it again to a different page, an older one near the back, and held that one up too. A man in a chair, looking out a window. Back to the viewer. She said, "I drew that when I was 10 years old. I had no photograph of you, no reference. I just tried to draw what a person looked like when they chose to look away from everyone behind them." She paused. "I spent a long time wondering what you were looking at out that window that was worth more than us." She closed the book. I stopped needing to know. Then Denise moved from the doorway into the room. She stopped midway and stood, and when she spoke the room reorganized around her voice in the way that rooms reorganize around the voice of the person whose story it actually is. She said, "Raymond, I want to say something and I need you to hear all of it." He said, "All right." She said, "The night you left, you called me nothing through an open window on a street where our neighbors could hear you. You told your newborn daughters through me that they were going nowhere. I want you to look around this room right now and understand what nothing built." She let that land. Then she said, "I am not telling you that to wound you. I am telling you because I want you to understand that those words became the reason I never stopped. Every morning for 25 years when something was hard, and many mornings something was hard, I thought about what you said, and I used it. I turned it into fuel, and I burned it for 25 years, and this is what it produced." She gestured at the room, at the house, at the 3 women standing in it. Then she said, "I forgave you a long time ago, Raymond. Not for your benefit. For mine, because I was not going to carry the weight of hating you for the rest of my life. But I need you to understand the difference between forgiveness and trust, and between forgiveness and welcome. I forgave you. I do not trust you. And you are not welcome here the way you would have been if you had stayed. What happens in this room from this point is going to be determined by these 3 women. Not by you. And not even by me." She stepped back. There was a silence after that. A real one. The kind that asks to be respected. Nobody rushed through it. Raymond stood in it and did not try to fill it with anything, which was perhaps the first instinct he had followed correctly in that room. Then Madison said, "We need to speak with our mother privately. We would like you to wait in the kitchen." He went without a word. He sat at Denise's kitchen table, and he looked at the life arranged around him on every surface. Report cards on the bulletin board. Photographs at every age. A child's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. Labeled us in handwriting, so young the letters were barely formed, but the certainty was absolute. A full and real and well-loved life, displayed openly in a kitchen he had never sat in, that had been built entirely without him and was not missing anything. He sat with that for the time it took them to talk. He did not look away from any of it. Denise came in alone after a few minutes. She sat across from him at her own table, and she said, "What do you need from them? Not what you want. What you actually need." Raymond thought about it honestly. Then he said, "I need them to know that I understand what I did. That I am not here to minimize it or reframe it. I need to say that to their faces and have them hear it. Not because it changes anything. Because I cannot keep living as the man who drove away and never accounted for it." Denise looked at him. She said, "You already said it. They heard it. So what happens next cannot be about what you need anymore." Raymond said, "I know." She stood and went back to her daughters. All 3 daughters came into the kitchen together. Madison stood in the doorway. She said, "We talked. We are not going to offer you a relationship right now. We are not there, and we will not make a promise we cannot keep. What we are going to give you is this. You can write to us. Real letters, not messages. Because we want a format that requires you to sit with what you want to say before you send it. Think about that. A format that requires you to sit with it. If you write, we will read every letter. We will discuss them among ourselves. If something in them is worth responding to, one of us will respond. We cannot tell you how often or how quickly, but we will read everything. That is what we have right now. If you can accept that on our terms and stay within it without pushing for more, we will see where it goes. If that is not enough for you, then today is where this ends, and we wish you well. Raymond said, I can accept that. He said it quietly, without asking for anything additional, without renegotiating. Madison said, then that is where we start. Morgan said one more thing before they left. She said, I want you to hear something. I did not come into this room today ready to offer you anything. I came in ready to be done with it. She paused. What changed my mind was watching you stand there and answer questions honestly when a more comfortable answer was available. That is the first evidence you have given any of us that you might be capable of something different than what you have shown us. It is not enough to build on yet, but it is something. She looked at him for a moment. Do not waste it. Then she walked out. Mia was last. She paused in the doorway and looked back. She said, I want to tell you something about the triptych. The one in the gallery. I started it 5 years ago. Long before I knew you were back in this city. Long before today. She paused. I called it what we built because I wanted people who looked at it to ask themselves what they were building. Not what they had. What they were actively building. Because a life is not what you have accumulated. It is what you are in the process of creating right now, today, with the choices that are in front of you. She looked at him steadily. You are 56 years old, and you still have choices in front of you. What you build with the rest of your time is going to be your actual answer to everything you did. Not what you say today. What you build. She closed the sketchbook and walked out. Raymond sat alone in the kitchen for a while after they had gone back to the other room. He could hear them. The sound of a family resuming itself. The layered warmth of people who share a history picking up where they had been before the interruption. He understood that room was not his. He found his coat. He went out the back door quietly and stood on the porch looking at the garden Denise had planted. Then he walked down the driveway and got in his car. He drove back to his boarding house. He found a notepad. He sat at his small table and he wrote the first letter. It took him 3 hours to get it right. He mailed it the next morning before work. Raymond writes a letter every month without exception. He does not miss months. He does not push for more than the girls offered. He writes about the boarding house and the logistics job and the Greenville he came back to and is slowly learning to inhabit again without the constructed identity he had spent 11 years wearing in Charlotte. He writes about what he understands now. He writes about the things he got wrong and the logic that produced them, plainly, without dressing it up, without seeking comfort in the telling. He is not writing to be forgiven. He is writing because the alternative is silence, and he has had 25 years of silence. And he understands now what silence cost everyone, including himself. Madison reads every letter. She said, I read them and I set them down and I give myself a few days before I decide how I feel about what was in them. Sometimes I write back. Sometimes the letter does not earn a response yet, and I wait. But I read every one. She paused when she told me this. She said, it is not forgiveness. It is not a relationship. It is me choosing to leave a door slightly open because I believe people are capable of change, and I do not want to be the kind of person who closes a door before the evidence is in. She is still at Carolina's medical center. Still precise. Still the most prepared person in every room. She is also, her colleagues say, the physician who spends the most time sitting with patients after delivering difficult news. Not explaining further. Just sitting. Being present. She learned that from watching a woman who stayed. Morgan has not responded to any of the letters yet. She said she is not ready, and she said it without apology. She is still in Atlanta. Cornerstone Families expanded last year, a new mentorship component specifically designed for daughters raised by single mothers, pairing them with women who built successful careers as single parents. The program has a 3-year waiting list. Morgan does not publicize the personal root of the work. She does not need to. The people who work closely with her understand where it comes from. They can feel it in how personally she takes every family that comes through the organization, the particular kind of attention she gives to daughters who are angry and do not yet know what to do with the anger. She knows exactly what to do with it. She learned by doing it herself. Mia responded to the second letter with a few lines. She told Raymond she had gone back to the gallery after his visit and added one element to the triptych installation. Not a fourth panel. A small mirror mounted into the wall beside the 3 paintings at standing height, positioned so that every viewer who stopped in front of what we built could also see their own face reflected back alongside the 3 women in the work. She wrote to him, "I want people to ask themselves what they are looking at, and then I want them to ask themselves what they are building. Those are different questions, and most people only ask the first one." The piece won a regional award the following spring. Mia donated the prize money to her mother's retirement account. She told Denise a week after she had done it. Denise cried. Mia said, "I learned what generosity looks like from watching you do it every day for 25 years. This was just me being accurate about where it came from." Denise retired at 62. The party her staff organized filled the entire third floor of the hospital and ran 2 hours past its scheduled end. Her charge nurse gave a speech about what it meant to work alongside someone who showed up completely every single day regardless of personal circumstances, who treated every patient and every colleague as the most important thing in the room, who had demonstrated over decades what professional excellence rooted in genuine care actually looked like in practice. Denise stood at the front of the room and listened and thought about a Sunday night in November when she had sat at her kitchen table alone with 3 sleeping babies down the hall and a man's words in the air around her, and made a decision about who she was going to be. She thought, every person in this room is part of the answer to that night. She did not say it out loud. She thanked her staff with real warmth and let her daughters take her to the restaurant she had always wanted to go to. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. She ate every bite and felt no guilt about any of it. She still lives on Millbrook Drive. Gloria is still there, 81 now, slower but present and completely herself. They have Sunday dinners every week the girls can make it, and when all 3 are home the house has the particular warm loudness of a family that knows each other deeply and still finds things to discover. Denise works in her garden most evenings. She says it is the best part of retirement, putting her hands in the ground and growing things from nothing. She has been doing a version of that her entire adult life. Now she just does it outside. Raymond Cole writes his letters. He goes to work. He lives in a rented room in the city he burned down and came back to, and he is learning, without shortcuts, what it means to do the right thing when there is nothing left to gain from it. He wrote in his 6th letter, "I understand that doing the right thing now, when everything is gone, is not the same as doing the right thing when it would have cost me something real. I know the difference, and I am not asking you to pretend I don't. I am asking only to be given the space to become something other than the man who left. Whether his daughters decide that space is worth giving, only the letters will tell." But he keeps writing them. 1 a month, every month. The way Denise kept the night rotation and the college fund contributions and the forward motion that eventually became a life. One small thing, done consistently, without expectation of immediate return. He learned it from the wrong place and the wrong time. But he learned it. On a November night 25 years ago, a man called a woman nothing and drove away from 3 newborn daughters. That woman sat in her dark kitchen and turned the worst thing anyone had ever said to her into the fuel she burned for the next quarter century. She raised 3 daughters who became extraordinary. She built a career that earned the respect of everyone who worked alongside her. She bought a house and planted a garden and kept a Sunday dinner tradition and never once said a bitter word about the man who left to the daughters who carried half of him. Raymond Cole came back to that house with nothing. No money. No standing. No claim on anything inside it. And what he found on the other side of that door was the complete, living, undeniable answer to every word he had said through that open window on a warm November night. He found everything. Built by the woman he left. Inhabited by the daughters he abandoned. Standing so solidly and so completely and so fully without him that the only honest thing a person could do standing inside it was sit down and be quiet and begin, very slowly, the work of becoming someone who deserved to have knocked on that door. Whether Raymond Cole gets there is still being written. 1 letter at a time. I want to ask you something before you go, and I want you to actually sit with it rather than answering it quickly. When a person who hurt you deeply comes back years later with nothing left, nothing to offer except honesty and the hope of a door left slightly open, what do you owe them? Not what religion says. Not what the people around you would expect. Not the answer that makes you look gracious in public. What do you actually believe in the honest part of yourself where the real answers live? Because Denise and her daughters gave an answer to that question on a Saturday afternoon in April, and it was not simple, and it was not clean, and it did not fit neatly into any category of story we usually tell about forgiveness or justice or redemption. It was just true. And truth, I think, is the only thing that actually holds up over time. The performed version of forgiveness. The performed version of justice. Those things look right in the moment, and then they fall apart later because they were never built on anything real. What Denise and her daughters built was real. Every piece of it. And it is still standing. Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me which moment in this story hit you the hardest. Was it the night he left, and what he said through that open window? Was it Denise at the kitchen table in the dark, turning his cruelty into fuel? Was it the drawing Mia made at 10 years old of a man who looked away? Was it Morgan saying she had come into that room ready to be done with it? And what changed her mind? Tell me. I read every single comment on this channel, and the conversations that happen after stories like this one are always worth more than I could have predicted. You bring things to these stories that I did not put there. That is what makes this community worth building. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss what we bring you next. We release a new story every single week. Next week, I am bringing you the story of a woman who discovered on her wedding anniversary that the man she had been married to for 18 years had an entirely separate family living 3 cities away. 2 wives, 2 sets of children. One man who believed he could sustain it forever. He was wrong. That story is coming. Stay with me.